I grew up in a family of entrepreneurs. While neither of my parents owned a business, I have entrepreneurs on both sides of my family. Growing up, my first introduction to entrepreneurship was through my grandmother. My grandma Vondale was a milliner, so she made beautiful dress hats for the women in our community. My grandmother was respected for her craft. Even to this day, the art of making dress hats is not one that is widely known. There are not a lot of people who possess that skill. And so if you know how to make dress hats and you know how to make them well, it can be quite lucrative. And while I did not recognize it at the time, but my grandmother was an amazing entrepreneur. She made a living from her craft, and I was privileged to be able to observe her in action. I saw the behind the scenes work, the preparation that went into arranging the hats on the hat blocks, and the details that went into creating the designs of the hats. And I had an opportunity to help my grandmother sell her hats at various markets in the local area. I would go with her sometimes to help her put out her hats on her display table. And my grandmother also allowed me to help her put the different price tags on various hats. Again, at that age, I did not realize that what I was essentially learning by simply being with her were entrepreneurial skills. But one of the reasons that I did not recognize it as such was simply because that language was just not used in describing what my grandmother did. However, I imitated her. Because I remember one day I asked my grandma Vondale if I could take some notepads that she had at her house. She had ordered these colored notepads and she had several left over. And I asked her if I could take those notepads to school with me to sell them. Now, I attended a private Christian school at that time, and on these little notepads it said, "Jesus loves you." And so I took these notepads to school, and I can't remember exactly how much I sold them for, but I know that I walked away with about $5. And I remember that distinctly because I had so much pride over the fact that I had earned $5. I had to be about 6 years old at this time. So in my mind, that was pretty good. And that was where my passion for entrepreneurship, I think, was really born. It was really seeing my grandmother operate and see how she was able to make a living from her craft. My paternal grandfather, he was also an entrepreneur. He owned a bowling alley in the city of Detroit in the 1970s. And my father actually loved bowling for that reason because he spent a lot of time at my grandfather's bowling alley. And even though my father did not go on to formally start a business, there were individuals within my family who continued that tradition. My aunt on my father's side, both her and my uncle own a funeral home in Detroit. And now they've retired from their work and they've passed on the funeral home to their son. They were grooming him even before he entered college to be able to take over the family business. And so now my cousin and his wife run the funeral home in Detroit. And I've had many conversations with my aunt about entrepreneurship because she has often shared with me some of the challenges that they had to overcome to become a successful and sustainable business within the city of Detroit. And I have a lot of respect for my aunt and my uncle and the work that they do. And so for me, as I reflect, I've always had quality examples of entrepreneurs in my family. And I think it was once I officially got to high school that I started to see myself more in an entrepreneurial light, even though I had always been doing certain things that represented an entrepreneurial mindset. I had a lemonade stand, for example, when I was younger. In fact, one of our family friends, he would ride by sometimes and he would purchase lemonade from me from my lemonade stand. He will ultimately become one of my first founding board members of my nonprofit organization that I founded when I was 23 years old. And I remember around that time, he said, you know what? I always had a feeling that you were going to become an entrepreneur because you were always selling something. And he was right. I mean, I didn't think about it that way. I was imitating what I saw. I did always have some new idea for how I could make my own money. And it wasn't because my family was struggling. My family wasn't struggling. It was just that I always liked having my own money. In fact, I'll never forget asking my mom for permission to start a job when I was 13 years old. I had a goal in mind. I wanted to work this job at a local restaurant because I wanted to save up money to purchase a car. And I figured that if I started when I was 13, that within 3 years, I could save up enough money to purchase myself a car. And you had to be at least 16 years old to get your driver's license at the time. And I don't know what it is now, but my point is that I always liked to have my own money. I think for me early on, I saw entrepreneurship as a way to have my own. And I just liked the idea of being able to be creative and innovative and come up with my own ideas and ways of doing things. And sometimes I think that depending on what profession you are in and what job you have, you're somewhat restricted to how creative you can be. You have to fall in line with the way that things are structured within that environment. And that is just simply the way of the world, right? But I think one of the awesome things about being an entrepreneur is that you get to create your work culture. You get to set the tone and set the standard for your business, and you get to set the vision for the course and the direction that you are going in as a company and as an individual. I became a social entrepreneur when I founded a literacy nonprofit organization company. I started my literacy nonprofit organization because I wanted to eradicate illiteracy within my city. And I took all of the steps to legally incorporate my business because it was something that I was passionate about. And I think that's one key to being a successful entrepreneur is that you have to care about the work that you do, because it's not easy to start a business, whether you are in the social sector like I was, or you're in the for-profit sector. One of the moments that I can recall that really affirmed that I was in the right space and that I was doing the right work was when I actually became a semi-finalist for the Echoing Green Fellowship, which is a prestigious fellowship for transformational leaders. This particular fellowship has been earned by Van Jones. He was a fellow in 1994. And he used the funding that he received from his fellowship as well as the training to form the Ella Baker Center for Civil Rights. And he's best known today as an author and social commentator. Even though I did not make it as a finalist for the Echoing Green Fellowship, it really did affirm for me that I was doing the right work and that I am an innovative thinker. I am an innovator. And so I bring that to the work that I do, whether I'm working for myself or working for someone else. I'm an innovative thinker. I'm a visionary. I'm creative. And those are some of the qualities that entrepreneurs have, whether you are in the social sector or you're in the for-profit sector. Those are certain characteristics that entrepreneurs have. While I do believe that there are certain characteristics that are innate to certain individuals, I think that some of the characteristics that I mentioned can be cultivated in young people. And I think it's extremely important that as adult leaders, especially those of us who identify as entrepreneurs ourselves, to be watchful and observant of what we see our children or the youth that we work with, what we see them doing. Just like I described earlier, I used to take things with me to school and sell it. And I used to sell lemonade. I had lemonade stands. There were certain things that I just did to some degree because I was mimicking what I saw, but also because I had soaked up all of these experiences from being around individuals in my family who were entrepreneurs. And as a result, I gained some skills from simply being around them. It wasn't like they had conversations with me about sales or branding or things like that. Again, like I said, I never even heard the word entrepreneur until I actually got a little bit older. I would say closer to middle school is when I started hearing words like that mentioned, and then it clicked, for me that, oh, that's what I've been doing all of this time. And so that's the first strategy that I would actually recommend to anyone who's trying to empower and encourage young entrepreneurs is use the language of entrepreneurship around young people. When you see them doing something that's entrepreneurial, use that language to describe what you see. Because don't assume that they have heard that language before or that they even understand how it connects with what they're doing. Use that language with them so that they understand what you see them doing. And then the second strategy that I would recommend is engaging them in conversations. Find out what it is that is driving them to do what they're doing. For me, again, like I said, it wasn't like my family was struggling or, to meet ends meet or anything like that. I did not have to do those things that I was doing, but I was intrinsically motivated. I do like having financial security, and I do like making wise choices when it comes to money because you never know when your rainy day is going to come. And I think that for all business owners, you should have some level of proficiency in money management. It's critical not only to business success, but it's critical to personal and family success. And so I'll just say that as well as a strategy for helping young people to become quality leaders and excellent entrepreneurs is also talk to them about money, because I think that it is important to have conversations about money. And we should be having conversations with our children and our youth about money, because how else are they really going to truly understand the value of money? Of course, what we do speaks more volumes, obviously, but it is important to also have those conversations with them so that they can make wise decisions and manage their money. Because even if they ultimately go to work for someone else, they need to know how to manage their money. So that's the third strategy that I would recommend is to have conversations with children about money and help them to understand how to manage their money. And then the fourth strategy that I would recommend for encouraging and empowering young entrepreneurs is to support them. It seems so simple, but we have to be willing to support them. If they come to us and they say, you know, mom, dad, or mentor, this is something that I want to do, we cannot stop there and say, oh, that's a great idea. So ask them to go and write out their idea, put it on paper. Ask them to start doing some research online to find some entrepreneurial programs that might be available within your area. I know that here in the state of Michigan, there are quite a few. And so I will make sure that I post and share those resources following this conversation. However, don't stop there. Actually have them to enroll in those programs so that they can formally learn about entrepreneurial concepts and they can engage in conversations about entrepreneurship with their peers. And if there are programs within their school, encourage them to get involved with school programs that encourage financial literacy and that encourage entrepreneurship. I remember the closest thing that we had to that in my high school was the school store. You could work within the school store and you could help out and learn different management skills from being in that particular program. And I think most schools still have programs like that. And they may even have an entrepreneurship program that strictly focuses on entrepreneurship. So plug in your children to those programs so that they can start as early as possible to jumpstart their careers as entrepreneurs, because entrepreneurs are problem solvers. They add value. They look for ways to add value to our society. And whether you are an entrepreneur in the social sector or you are an entrepreneur in the for-profit sector, you are a problem solver. And we have a lot of bright young people who have great ideas that could not only transform our communities, but that could transform our nation and our world. And when we encourage young people to be independent thinkers and innovative thinkers, and we don't expect them to necessarily conform to the norm, we can actually cultivate quality leaders and entrepreneurs that could just totally shift what is possible for us in the future.